Hello and welcome back to the Double and Radio Gamescast, the Ryan Sick edition. So, we might be going a little short, and I might stop in the middle of a sentence to cough off mic, but, you know, you do the best with what you got. So,
This is everyone's favorite edition of the show, is when Ryan
especially,
is
it's happened
horribly,
like 2 or 3
horribly sick.
times at this point.
Yes.
And I'm Alex.
Yeah, well, you preempted what I was about to go into, which was the duo of co-hosts Alex and Wyatt, but I see that you've just run with it, so let's move on. Today, I want to talk about a couple of games that have come out recently, and I think because of the space that these games exist in, it made sense to extend that discussion to be a what makes you stick with the game discussion. And so what I kind of want to start with is a game that I know a couple of us have been playing. Alex, I don't know that you've played this, but Wyatt and I definitely played a little bit, which is the first Descendant. So
Do we have to?
I want to be very
good
clear,
looking at
and
this.
neither one of us has played very much of this game.
I
No.
was
We've
watching
played
this
about
unfold
an
from the
hour.
outside.
I don't.
So I want to mention this game because it's in a genre that we are known to enjoy, which is shooters of the cooperative variety, especially when they involve
sci-fi.
loot. And sci-fi, yeah. It's a pretty commonly shared interest from all three of us. And the first Descendant, I think, has come in with a lot of marketing, a lot of relative hype in the genre as the first kind of new thing to launch there in a while, since like Outriders a couple years ago.
Boy, it sure had marketing, huh?
It
Well, that's
sure
the thing.
did have marketing.
It had a lot. It had a lot of marketing.
A lot
And
of confusing marketing too.
I just didn't pay attention to any of it because I think looter shooters at the moment just do not give me any kind of like dopamine kick whatsoever. And so I was like, whatever, I don't really care. But I downloaded it on a whim because I was like, oh, it's free to play. I guess what's the harm in giving it a try and then dipping?
And then you
Yeah.
found out the harm, which was pure, sheer,
Okay.
unadulterated apathy.
Well,
Apparently,
that's the thing. Like I don't want it to seem like it's like, oh, it's terrible. It was just I was so bored the entire time.
It's really
And I-
a game for people that like to grind in a way that is like beyond even something like Warframe.
I was about
Yeah.
to say it's even more so than wait a few days for this item to finish,
'Cause,
or this
Warframe
item deteriorates
has
in 3 days.
generally a very good story once it gets going. The first Descendant doesn't start super strong. It starts very generically, with a story setup that seems very akin to Anthem.
Oh
what I can get.
boy.
Which I don't actually
Yeah.
have a problem with. I actually think Anthem's story had potential before the writing of that game killed it. But
the pitch is not bad. It's just everything else.
Yeah.
It's sort of set in that recovering post-apocalypse time.
Can I just say, why is especially every single sci-fi looter shooter has the same setting where it's like sci-fi thing, giant cataclysm that ruined humanity happened, and now you're like the cleanup crew. Let's think about
it's
it,
Destiny.
right?
I think it's a Destiny
Okay.
1 thing. I think Destiny 1 was popular, and now everything's copying it.
Destiny, Anthem, Division, like literally so many of them.
I don't know if you can say that for Warframe
Outriders.
without spoilers.
You can kind of say that for Warframe. It's very known that like there was an empire that fell, but Warframe is also not like a post-apocalypse generally.
But they're always set in what I always feel like is like the least interesting point in history for all of these like.
Yeah, I feel like Warframe and the
Universes.
Division get away from a little bit of that. At least the Division 1.
I
I
would
think
say-
Division 2 has that
I
problem.
would say
but-
Division 2. Well, I was going to say Division 2 I think is better. Division 1 very much kind of has that setup for me, whereas the
I'm
second
only talking
one I
about,
feel
yeah,
like
I'm
is
only talking
more.
about the start. Because Division 2 I have not gotten very far into, despite enjoying it.
It's pretty
but
good.
Division 1 I played a fair bit of, and I think Division 1 works as like a pitch, right? Same thing with like Destiny. I think Destiny is a very good example of how to do that right. It's been handled...
Not at first.
Not at first, right? Not with Dinklebot.
not during 2014
Not at first.
or 15.
But like once you're to the Taken King and the original like D1 end of era stuff, the Destiny is received very well. And I think their newer stuff is middling to great, depending on what it is.
Oh yeah, it definitely fluctuates on the year.
Yeah, fluctuates by expansion like every MMO.
Yeah.
which we'll talk more about because I want to talk about Dawntrail too today. But first
Mm.
Descendant, overwhelming feeling of just apathy, I think, is sort of what I would describe it as. And
Yeah.
also just like really feeling like they've taken from other things to a degree
Oh.
that is like most games do this, but I really did just feel like I was playing a weird Void Titan.
Oh, wait, did you
Um,
guys see the little image that I put in general
Yes.
from Forbes,
Yeah.
courtesy of Paul Tassi? That is wholesale yoinkage. My
Yeah.
God.
So to explain, there's a lot of UI elements, especially specific like ability icons and that kind of thing, that if they're not just straight up the exact same thing, then boy howdy was the homework copied almost to a T.
Yeah, it's
Because I haven't
understandable.
played the game.
Understandable in certain cases. Like I think the exploding bullet is fine. Like that's a very universal imagery. But then there's stuff like the volt shot icon, which is
Yeah.
so
Now,
specific.
I was gonna say I haven't played the game yet, so I can't speak to this part. But I feel like from the vibes that I've been given of, oh, they took these mechanics and like the modding from Warframe as well. Um, are the icons shown, to your guys' knowledge, used for the same type of perks that they are in Destiny in
I
the first
genuinely
Descendant?
don't know.
Yeah, I did not hit the point where those icons were in the game.
I
So
don't know.
probably further along. I did also see they have a sniper rifle that looks very similar to the Ikelos weapons
Yes.
and a few other things that are
I will
definitely
also
like very
say
Destiny adjacent, which is fine.
I will also say this is less fair because there's a lot of things that use this. If you look at the A in First Descendant, that's also the same A that's used in Titanfall. That like triangle looking thing.
Yeah.
Although that's used for a lot of different things, so I can't really blame it too much. But again, it's that feeling of like we're going to take a little
It just
bit
sort
of
of
this.
feels like it doesn't have its own identity. Like there's no
It's a
one
collage.
unifying thing like a lot of
And
other things. Instead, it feels like a mishmash of like Warframe and Destiny.
And I'll go on, like, I'll probably at some point talk about genre blending and, like, taking little things from other games. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I actually get really excited when I see a game kind of blending different genres or different aspects of different genres together. This just feels like it's an identity crisis, less so than, like, oh, we can combine these things in a new and interesting way. It's just, I don't know, these were successful. Huck that in there. Why not?
Let's talk about new and interesting also, especially. This is, more than likely personal gripe. I think that the art style itself adds to the just overwhelmingly beigeness in flavor of the game. It looks so relentlessly generic. And
To
Yeah,
me, it
the,
reminds me of Stellar Blade if Stellar Blade did not have the cool layer of like flesh monsters that takes it over the top. Like I think Stellar Blade looks very generic until that happens. Um, First Descendant doesn't have that. At least from how far I was in, I did not see any crazy amalgamation things or anything super unique. It felt pretty samey. So
and then it's the other problem is that it kind of has these cool mechanics or mechanics that have been proven to be cool in other things and they don't really do anything with it. They have a grappling hook, I think, for every class, right? And listen, I'm a simple man. You put a grappling hook in my shooter and I'm probably going to enjoy using it quite a bit. But this one had so little purpose. It felt like, first of all, the feeling of it isn't great because it doesn't really flow with the rest of your movement all that well. It feels like everything stops while you're shooting it and then you like zoom towards something and it just doesn't feel
yeah,
fluid
it
at
like
all.
kills your momentum when you use it. You keep your
Yeah.
momentum at the end of
Oh.
the jump, but it's still weird. It just feels off.
And they don't like literally I remember when you get to the first basically like patrol zone, right? It's what it is. It's a patrol zone because it's got a bunch of other stuff. It's got other players running around and little side objectives or whatever. Like literally the first building I tried to jump on top of, there was an invisible wall and it wouldn't let me. And I was like, okay. Now there were others that I could hop on top of, but it's not a great feeling when it's like, oh, I want to go on top of this building. That would be fun. No.
You say the first. Was this like also the closest one, or like the most? Ooh, that this looks like a
I think
spectacular
so.
set piece type thing.
Yeah, it was literally like you spawn in an area, there's a cutscene plays, and then it opens you up to this area. It's literally a building that's just off to your right. And I think it was basically the closest building to me at the time. Yeah. And then I think Ryan and I were both talking of like the guns just don't feel very good.
Yeah, they don't feel any better than any other game, and I would say they feel pretty universally under something like Destiny.
Oh,
Which,
way under, in my opinion.
like I think you gotta have that nailed down. And when like Warframe guns feel better, and I think Warframe guns often don't feel great, but I would say they feel generally better than First Descendant stuff, at least from the early game stuff. Obviously, we didn't play to the point of having legendaries and whatnot, so
It was a bad combination of like, wow, none of these weapons feel very good. Every time I pick up a new weapon, it's like the same looking assault rifle every time. It's the same looking shotgun every time.
yeah. And I will say there are things that
Right.
that I appreciate. I do like that there's an actual loot system here. I think it's more enjoyable to have that than Warframe's time system. Like, as much as I understand the mechanism of Warframe's like time gating, I think it just feels bad at the start. Whereas this felt a lot more immediate when I got something. But the modding is just as weird as Warframe is, and less interesting. Like, it's a lot of just flat bonuses and very little interesting effects. And yeah, it just felt very generic. We'll see how it goes, because I think Nexon has a lot of experience running these types of games and a lot of experience running them into the ground. So we'll see where this is on the Nexon side, because a few of the things have been very, very good. Like DNF Duel, to my knowledge, is pretty well received. Dave the Diver is Nexon published and is excellent.
Dave the Diver's great. Yeah, that's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, but a lot of their other more specific stuff is not great. And I think a big part of that is this is a Nexon developed thing, I believe, and not just a Nexon published thing.
Not Lost Ark. Babylon's Fall, was that them?
No, that was Platinum. That was an insane thing.
Okay.
Which is crazy to say out loud, but it's true.
Yeah, Nexon, I believe they also had some link to Arcade. I don't develop that game.
They also published. I know they're in some way. I think they published Finals.
Yes.
Oh.
Which, yeah, they've had a few good things. Like they I believe, are publishers on Dirty Bomb at some point too. Although I could be wrong about that. But they do okay when they're publishing something. I think when it's an in-house thing, they tend to be very, very stingy with the pay to do whatever things.
I feel like saying like X thing feels like it was made with AI. I feel like it's a very overdone statement, but specifically with like how it feels like things are being plucked from other looter shooters. It's like, oh, this game works, so we'll do a little bit of that. It feels like an
SEO optimization of a game, like a search engine optimized video game. Yeah, okay. I think that's enough of First Descendant talk, because
very boring.
We played very little of it. I might play more to see if it gets a little bit more interesting in like
I've
more than
already
an hour,
uninstalled it. I've already uninstalled it. Like I said, I can't tell if it's the looter shooter part that's boring me or it's the actual game that's boring me. In this case, I think it's a combination of the two.
Like just not wanting to play a looter shooter right now, and also the game not being super interesting.
And I'm open if one catches my attention. I'm open to playing more of it. But I feel like I've been so burnt out on looter shooters over the last 5 years or whatever that I'm just not.
Yeah, I think for me it's less of the looter shooter part and more the live service bit. I'm just not really into another ongoing live service at the moment. But
I'll put it this way: a looter shooter is going to have to really impress me with like unique features or even just like a good amount of variety and that kind of thing. And this does not have that in the first hour, and I was just not into it.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay, last thing I want to say about First Descendant, because it moves us into another game that I want to talk about, that I think I'm the only one who's been playing, but is very, very fun so far, is First Descendant has a pretty bad first impression, I would say. At least with the class that I picked, which was Ajax, I think the tanky, like, bullet shield, Titan-style character. Because a lot of the things that are in Ajax's kit just don't work in the first mission very well. They have like a tutorial moment where you're supposed to use the jump to like land on a platform to kill enemies. And they tell you to do that, but they don't tell you how to aim the jump at all. And so you use the jump button and it just launched me like way too far or way too shallow multiple times in a row. And I was just like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to aim this. Not a great first impression. Compare that to Zenless Zone Zero, which is Hoyoverse's new games. and it's very bad for me that this is a good game because I counterpicked it thinking that it wouldn't come out this year. Because there was a lot of talk behind the scenes of like just people that are in the gacha realm saying that Zenless Zone Zero was going under a lot of dev troubles and had some issues in the back end because it was taking a long time. It's come out, and I would say is pretty good. I think there's problems. It's relatively simple. It's obviously like splitting between a mobile game and a console game, and I think does that better than Honkai Star Rail does. Although I think Honkai is a better phone game. It plays very, very good on phones. But Zenless Zone Zero, very fun so far. It's got a sense of style that I think is unmatched. I legitimately cannot think of another thing outside of maybe Persona that has as good of a sense of style as Zenless Zone Zero does. The combat is satisfying. I wouldn't say it's super complicated at the moment that I'm at, but the team building's fun. It feels very generous for a free-to-play gacha. I've not spent any money on it, so it feels very fair to play at this point. I think I have basically every character that isn't an S rank, and there's not very many S rank characters. So there's a lot to do without paying anything. And the combat's really fun. It's got a very good like team-based combat flow where you're constantly moving between your teams. Your defensive move is a team switch move, so you're swapping characters when you do it, which is very cool, and you get like a cool assist move when they come in, and it just looks incredible all the time. Yeah, I think combat flows really well. The other layer of it is it's not open world like Honkai kind of is and Genshin definitely is. It's more of a like almost roguelite mix at a certain point. You unlock a mode where you are basically moving through like VCR players, and they have like roguelite tiles that basically function as the map, and you're going through and basically playing a roguelite. And it's very interesting. It's definitely a lot more strange than what I thought it would be. Like I figured there'd be a lot more like on-foot exploration, which there is not. It's definitely a weird mix, and it's also got like Persona time management in that has not been important yet. I don't know if it will be at a certain point, but there are things of like every day in game you can do 4 activities, and each one moves the clock forward, and different things will happen at different times. Which I don't think is super important yet, but it seems like there can be events that happen at different times of day that you can just move through by going and playing a mission and then coming back. Yeah, it's very interesting.
A few of the things that I was really psyched about seeing it for, because I'm still not like that deep into gacha games. I play like one mobile Fire Emblem thing, but I was really excited to see the level of stylization that they have with the who's the masked character guy, because he has this big metal mask.
Yeah,
but
so it's not a metal mask. He is a robot.
So
he's a robot. He's Billy. Very fun
so
character.
Expressive. Like you get the what you think looks solid, but with the eyes moving in a very cartoonish way. It is
really some of the best character animation around. I would say there's very few things that are matching it.
Animation.
That was the crazy thing.
Really good voice acting.
Yeah, solid voice acting for most of it. Some of it's very tropey. There's a few characters that are definitely very much just anime tropes, but it's less so than I would say Genshin was at the start. I think Genshin's kind of moved away from that the longer it's been going, and they've kind of realized.
From what I've seen, the main cast seems really great.
Yeah, like they were doing a lot of very straight played anime tropes at the start of Genshin, and I'm glad to see they're getting a little bit more complex with it. I like the way that they handle the protagonist split this time, because you always pick if you want to play the male body type or the female body type protagonist. And in Zenless, they're siblings, and the one that you don't pick is still a major part of the story, and they're your sibling, and so that you're constantly talking to them. You hear them basically going over your shoulder whenever you're on a mission, just telling you what to do at certain points.
That's always a nice.
That are different.
That's always a cool idea when you can pick between a male or a female like character, but then whoever you don't pick is still part. Like I think of things like Assassin's Creed Odyssey does something kind of interesting with it.
Yeah.
And what was I just playing that also does it? Mass Effect Andromeda also does it to a less impactful degree, but they still work it into the story, which is kind of interesting. even if the story itself isn't great.
It's cool. There's moments where you end up playing your other sibling as like your own character is doing something else. You have to go move to your sibling, and if you pause during a mission, you can leave the combat and go walk around as the other sibling as well, and just like go see, and you can see different stuff with when you're playing them and get some unique flavor text and stuff. Which is super cool. There's just a lot of really neat ideas. I do think there are things that are odd. A lot of the character progression materials are time-gated behind an activity that is, like, you have limited entries per day into it, basically. And there's not, like, a real way around that. You can, like, pay your way past that, but at the same time, it's not really going to get you much progress compared to just doing it normally, because you can do it a lot per day. It's just a strange thing that feels like it might become a problem when I'm further in. It hasn't been yet, but it definitely, I can see getting to like beyond level 30 characters. It might be a huge issue to keep your team up to date. Just stuff like that. There's a lot of minor things that I'm sure will get needed out as it goes on, because Hoyoverse has a very good reputation at this point for handling their gacha games well. It has my favorite handling of a pity system, where it's very clear about the fact that like doing a 10 pull or a 1 pull doesn't matter. It's just every 10 things you're guaranteed to get a certain like high ranked of character, and then every like 90 you're guaranteed to get the S rank character. And
Does
just starting the game, they give you
reset after you get like a whatever S rank thingy?
Yeah,
Do you
so
know if
it's
like,
a pity of like, so if you get one to drop, it resets, but the timer basically, like, your chance goes up once you're past a certain point.
That is incredibly generous. That's
it's very clear
really nice
about
seeing
it,
that from,
and all the percentages
Gacha.
are available. It's much nicer about it than other competitor gacha games I think used to be. I think every gacha game is kind of like this now, just because of regulations that have come out, but it definitely feels very doable here. Like I've not spent anything on it, and I've felt very fairly treated as a free-to-play player. So yeah, I think overall really good start for this game. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think the story is pretty interesting, and I'm curious to see where it goes. And I'll report back if I'm still playing it in a while. But yeah, very good first impression. All right, did someone else have a game they want to talk about?
Are we staying away from the big boys like Shadow of the Erdtree and?
We can talk about Shadow of the Erdtree for sure, because a couple of us have been playing it. Alex, if you want to talk about it. I'll just say let's avoid like major spoilers, but I don't think either of us have finished it yet. So
I'll try my best. We know my track record. I'll try to shut up.
We believe in you, Alex. You got this. You got this.
Thank you, Ide. I need it. I am gripping the sides of my desk.
Just a bit of sweat coming down the forehead. Just.
All right,
purely visual joke for all of our listeners out
now
there.
that lengthy visual joke is played out.
I'm so sorry for the audio-only listeners who are probably thinking, what the fuck is happening right now?
I really need to be more vocal with the grunting there.
It's part of the fun. Yeah, Shadow of the Erdtree has come out, and now that the sort of discourse of Elden Ring too hard.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about that.
I think we have to. I think we have to at least mention
because
it.
because as someone who hasn't played Elden Ring or the DLC, right? I don't really know what people are talking about, other than even I guess like some Elden Ring fans are finding it too difficult or something. I don't really know what's happening, but I find it very fascinating.
So there's a couple of things that have kind of combined, and I think now that it's been out for a couple of weeks, we have sort of a better overview of what exactly was problematic and what was not. The main thing is that people were running in with the idea that their max level characters will probably stomp the game, right? Like they were thinking, I've played this character, they're level 150 and above.
And they're thinking that despite it being said multiple times that there's like a different way about scaling for this DLC.
Yeah, so that's the thing. There's these things called, they're called Shadow Tree Blessings. They're just spelled weird, but it's more fun to call them Scattered Tree Blessings.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
I'm going to call them Scattered Tree
What was that other
Blessings.
title? What was that? What was it called?
It's spelled Scadu Tree, like Scadu, which is an old spelling of shadow. So they're meant to be Shadow Tree Blessings, but it is far more fun to say Scattered Tree Blessings. So you're supposed to collect these blessings.
Way more on the do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's
You're supposed to
tree.
collect these blessings to power up your character, and they're very significant. They are like
And they buffed
huge
the first half
percentage
as well.
boosts.
Okay.
Yes. So
So
that was the
it's to
solution to people
prevent
complaining.
max level or high level characters just
Yes.
cakewalking
Yep.
through. Okay.
Essentially, what
Another
they do is
issue-
they like each one, and this is before the scaling buff. This has since changed, and they kind of front loaded it. But it used to be at launch that each one was about like a 5% buff to both defense and offensive stats.
Okay.
So imagine you get 5 of those. That's a significant boost, especially because the negation stat is a percentage negation. It's not like it doesn't boost your health, but it boosts your like armor and elemental damage mitigation, which when you're working with like percentage maths, the more you have of a thing, they get more effective. Because like going from 80 to 85%, for example, is a much bigger damage reduction than 5% if your baseline's 80.
Sure.
Because of how the math works out. So it becomes drastically more effective the more of them you have.
Another thing that a lot of people were complaining about was that they were entering the DLC on New Game Plus, which also,
Yes.
scales it up yet another level.
Which I will say, I do think there is a case to be made that they should have given you an option to start at a soul level 150 character to play the DLC, because I think tons of people have probably just not kept a non-New Game Plus character.
Yeah.
Like I had to just start a full new character and run through, just because I did not have a character that was not New Game Plus that would be able to go into the DLC. Which yeah, it's fun to replay Elden Ring, but it's a very very long game with a lot of stuff in it, and even being able to pretty heavily optimize. I think it still took me about 35 hours to get my character ready for the DLC, and I still went in early, just by nature of like I haven't beaten anything. I still have everything before like Ashen Capital stuff. I haven't gone to the Mountaintop of the Giants, so I've basically been like I'm like 2/3 the way through the game maybe, to go into the DLC, which is definitely earlier than you should be. Like this is very much an in-game thing, and to preempt people that might be worried that they'll be missing out on dialogue or something if they go in before certain events in the campaign, there is no dialogue in Shadow of the Erdtree that affects the main game. There's nothing that is like
completely separate. Yeah,
completely separated, no references. There are references, but there are no like cross progression things. So don't worry that you're ever going to be entering it at a bad state, because it doesn't matter.
One thing without saying spoilers, there was one like reference to a character that I was sad got patched out from an item description. That was weird.
I have no idea what you're referring to. And so,
Good.
yeah, it's basically there's no actual references to the main game. There's a lot of like tangentially related stuff, but nothing directly referencing it. And yeah, the difficulty discourse was interesting because I think it's pretty overwhelmingly turned from it was too hard to it's acceptable now. And I think a lot of that was they made it so the Shadow Tree blessings are more effective at the start. So the first like 5 to 10 that you get are going to be higher percentages, and the last ones start to peter out a little bit.
Do you think that was a like necessary thing, or do you think they could have left it?
I think it was just because of the degree of complaints. I think it was a very good way of handling the situation, because some of them are like, because it's not tied to levels, which like normal Elden Ring, you're gaining power from levels that you gain by exploring, because you're exploring and finding new content and getting more runes. Here, they don't know what level you're going to be when you go in, so they can't use levels as the primary method of progression. So instead it has to be an item, which means you need to find specific spots that have said item. And I think that makes it a little bit harder to control, just because people might miss something or they might not see it.
So these things are really well hidden too.
Some of them are,
yeah,
not all of them, but
there
are like predictions that you can do of if you see a church, it's probably going to be in a church. If you see any Erd tree looking like saplings, they're going to be there.
Yeah,
and they give you a map. They give you a map in each area to go in.
Of where the Scadu tree things are, or was that just the crosses?
Yeah, when you get Miquella's crosses, there's always a Scadu tree fragment by them.
Oh yeah.
So that gives you most of them. But it's also a case of in the base game, you don't need every like area to progress certain things to full. Here you do. You do need to get every Shadow Tree blessing to be at max. compared to some stuff in the base game. But yeah, it's an interesting setup. I think it works pretty well for getting that progression feeling back, but it is not helped by the fact that the first two bosses you're exposed to, I think, are a step above most things in the base game. The Dancing Lion, super cool fight, not actually that problematic once you get it down, but the camera is awful. It absolutely doesn't know how to deal with it.
I have said this for every FromSoft game, bar none. The camera is always awful, but it shines in how bad it is with incredibly large enemies and flailing beast type enemies. Large enemies, this isn't entirely a problem because you can, well, depending on how fast they are, you can not target lock on them, and you can get around their attacks pretty much fine, or hide behind a leg because a breath weapon isn't going to reach there in its certain in its field of view cone, things like that. With flailing beast type enemies, uh, not locking on isn't really an option because of how fast they move. They're going to whip around the camera too fast for you to be able to pivot because the camera motion when not locked
It's also
on is
got a
often
lot
too
of
slow as
particle
well.
effects going on,
That too,
especially
it
this
is
one.
blinding.
A very cool fight. Like Dancing Lion is super fun, but I think a lot of it could have been fixed by adding a second target luck point on the butt, which they do it for most beast bosses. They didn't do it for Dancing Lion for some reason, despite there often being attacks where it will like rear up on hind legs, and yet your only lock-on point is the face, which is in the middle of the air. So
Is
it doesn't
saying
help
what
you.
the boss actually is a spoiler?
I mean, not
for the Dancing Lion?
The Dancing Lion's the first thing of the game, so I
Okay.
don't.
It is such a cool boss design too, if you take away the flailing beast aspect of it, because it's one of those sort of it's like those parade dragon lion things. There are multiple people underneath it puppeting it. So why wouldn't we have two lock-on points?
Yeah, it's just a weird thing. Like I think that fight would have been a lot easier with two lock-on points. There's a couple of dragons in the expansion, and there's a few dragons that work normally where you can target their legs, and other ones that don't work normally where you can't target their legs. And I have no idea why it's like that, because the ones that you can't target the legs on are much harder to deal with because you have to unlock and try to figure out what's happening, especially when there are attacks that cover the entire ground and things, and it just is very strange. There are things that would be much easier to deal with if you could lock on 2 more points.
I was one thing that saved me and from a bunch of dragon fight woes was remembering Elden Ring has a jump button for a reason.
Yeah.
And that if you just jump, that'll completely avoid any ground attacks that spread like an AoE on the ground, like water and things like that. Jump attacks also make the bottom half of your body invulnerable. In addition, while rolling has the iframes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the DLC that is better dodged by jumping than by rolling. Dragons and stuff in particular, but it doesn't help you when you're a melee build trying to hit the boss. Like I think that's the biggest problem, is not dodging things, it's being able to hit the boss at all on a lot of these, just because especially if you're very strictly melee, you're gonna have a tough time. That said, it gives you a lot of cool new stuff. There's weapons that you can throw that do damage that are really awesome. All the new boss weapons are super cool. The other boss that people were often having a problem with is Rolana, who's one of the other first two bosses, who for a little while everyone thought was required, and then people realized she's totally not. You can just go around her. But still, one of the first bosses, pretty challenging fight. I wouldn't say super bad. It's just her... She is the moment where you'll realize that your levels don't matter and you need to find the Shadow Tree stuff, because she does a lot of damage. As
She's
does
a very
basically
cool...
everything in the game.
Is she like a reference or like callback or homage to a Dark Souls 3 boss that had the sort of magic and fire and ice swords?
She definitely reminds me of Pontifex from Dark Souls 3. I think she's easier to fight than Pontifex a little bit, because Pontifex was like super big, and so you would always have problems dodging that.
Big fan of human-sized enemies.
Yeah, human-sized enemies are fun. I think Rolana is very cool and a very good fight. Yeah, that was sort of the main difficulty discussion. I have heard a lot of people have been having trouble with the final boss, who I don't know what that boss is. I'm not there yet, but I have kept hearing that there is a lot of problems with that boss.
Let me solo her, the player famous for helping players defeat Melania. Melania? Melania.
Oh yeah, isn't he the guy with the pot on his head and he's
Yes.
like in
Yeah.
nothing but his underwear? Right. Okay.
He was having trouble with him for a good week and a half.
Yeah, so I don't know anything else about that boss, but I've repeatedly heard that there are people having a lot of trouble with it. So we'll see if that boss gets nerfed at all, but the Shadow Tree Blessing change, I think, made a lot of difference.
There is one more thing with boss design that I do have that is a bit more of a gripe for me here. For various reasons and physical disability things, I like to use summons in the game. I don't consider them cheating. They are a mechanic in the game that is given to you.
Alex, you've started that mention, which means we have to go over the thing. Shadow of the Erdtree is not as hard if you use the tools the game gives you to play it.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of people that really don't want to use them for some like pride reason. And yes, it's cool to beat the boss alone, but if it's your first run and you're having a ton of problems, don't feel like you shouldn't use summons.
Also, okay, because you see that in a lot of different games where it's like, well, if you use this, it's basically cheating, right? It's like, listen, if you here's the thing, if you have that personal belief for yourself, it's like, I don't want to use this because I think it's too easy, and you're just applying that to yourself. That is totally fine. Like, I want to beat the game not using whatever. Totally fine. But then to like go to other people who are maybe playing the game for the first time or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, if you use that, you're basically cheating. So shut the fuck up.
All right, continue, Alex.
So one of the boss designs here that appears in multiple, regardless of what kind of boss they are, that's really irked me. Like I say, regardless of what kind of fog gate bosses, not open world bosses. That is really made parts of the game a pain in the ass, has been their opening moves. There are so many bosses that will immediately lunge at you or charge at you, and these distance closing moves have little to no telegraph, especially when they're first used, and are instant. They are so blindingly fast. You so much more often than not don't have an ability to get summons out, even find a summon sign inside the boss room when they are inside the boss room instead of outside, to be able to help you with it. It is I think that part's needlessly cruel.
Yeah, I have a feeling what they wanted to do is make it harder to do a Comet Azure and Terra Mystica cheese on most of the bosses. Which is the like Comet Beam for people that don't play a lot of Magic stuff.
That's the build that people get really angry on to Magic users about.
Which like I get wanting to make that build less. The idea that you instantly delete the boss at the start of the fight, less of a thing. I get that. I don't think this was the right way to go about it, because it also has the problem of making summoning really hard at the start of fights. Using important potions and stuff at the start very difficult. So there's a lot of like, I think giving people a second to breathe at the start of a fight is a good thing. And some of these just don't do that. They absolutely have moves that will just come out and chase you down instantly. And there's some that really annoy me that are like, they're 50-50s. So when you go in, the boss will either do the slow walk up to you or will immediately pull out a crazy attack. So yeah, and not a huge fan of that, but it also it hasn't proven such a huge issue for me just because my build doesn't rely on summoning things at the start. But
I was just that overall is my biggest gripe. One of my very few gripes with it too.
Yeah.
But I was like, back when this first came out, I was incredibly skeptical. This was essentially a Lies of P situation for me as well. If you guys remember back then, where it's just like, oh, it's gonna be awful. I counterpicked this during our last Fantasy Critic thing. I play it. It's like that meme of the bird chomping into the cracker. Oh, this is good. Oh, this is very good.
You've had a Souls-like hyperbolic time chamber since Elden Ring came out.
I was a little worried because I'm just like, this is way too much of a meme at this point, but it's like Sekiro to me is an incredibly polished Souls experience because of you only have one weapon to work with. It focuses on a much smaller game experience compared to other Souls games and things. But I'm a huge fan of Sekiro. Long story short, and then I hear, oh, there's a tier for your wondrous physic that enables you to be able to perfect parry like in Sekiro, and it lasts for 5 minutes. Chomping into that good cracker again. Mmm,
It is
delicious. I
very
had to have
good.
it. That is never coming out of my flask. It is so fun. It's a really good meshing or melding of the two play styles. I don't think it's perfect or there yet. It is a wonderful stopgap for me, having fallen in love with Sekiro, though.
Yeah, it also makes
Going
you're
back
able
to
to play a more defensive boss fight playstyle without a shield.
Yes.
Because it
Yeah.
does the thing where if you perfect parry with that tier up with a normal weapon, it generally is like, if not a full damage negation, as close to it as possible. And it's very good.
Yeah, you look at the type of, like, if a weapon, I don't know. I haven't tested this out too much. I was trying to do that with with weapons that had different guard boost values to see if that made any difference. It may or may not have, but I also am not a master at the
Yeah,
parry
I'm sure
time
someone will have done the math by the time this is out. But yeah, I think overall this DLC is very good. I think as everyone kind of expected.
Shocker.
So, yeah, I don't think that's a surprising thing at all to hear. It's very good.
Oh
And
yeah.
a lot of the boss designs are awesome. A lot of the new stuff is very cool. A lot of weird underpowered magic in the DLC. There's a lot of like incantations and stuff that are markedly useless. So that's kind of a problem that FromSoft has always had with balancing magic, but I'm interested to see if they fix any of those or if some of them are bugs or whatnot. Because there's one that's like a feather storm, which I really wanted to use, and then I learned that it can't tick damage more than like every 0.3 of a second. So it's just useless. Like, it just doesn't work because it's meant to be like a Gatling gun shotgun blast. But if you can't hit the same thing more than once with a hit, I don't know what the point is. So,
Oh, I've been having a phenomenal amount of fun time with the martial arts moves.
yeah,
Those are
martial
really
arts
fun.
are super fun.
I haven't
Beast
tried them on a
claws are
boss
super
yet,
fun.
Is it like a? Is it
but
like
just general
a?
enemies.
Is
Very
it just like you just punch people?
There's like punching and kicking things. There's a what's the Ash of War that goes with the first one you get is like a palm force strike that you can charge up.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
super good.
I'm assuming this is all stuff you can carry over to the base game.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Everything is cross.
I'm very excited
compatible
to
afterwards.
try DLC weapons in the base game.
Yeah, I feel like DLC
I
weapons in
can't-
New Game Plus are going to be very fun.
Are
I
all of
can't wait
your
to fight
are all of
Melania.
the stat boosts and stuff that you get from Erd Tree, does that carry over to the
No,
base game?
that does
just DLC area.
No, that's probably for the best.
Yeah.
That's probably for the best.
It would be a lot if they did carry over.
I don't
but
want
yeah,
a one
overall,
shot
very good.
Malekith. Yes.
I want to mention the level design because I think this is the best level design that From has ever done, pretty universally. There's some areas that are a little bit more confusing, but I think most of it just feels like a really cool Metroidvania style experience, and I'm a huge fan of it. The world is a lot more condensed than Elden Ring by default is, which I think works really
The
well.
size of Limgrave.
Yeah, that was a bald-faced lie when they said that. This is huge.
Also,
As in
big
it's-
fan
as
of the
it's
shape of the
bigger?
map when you fully unlock it.
As in, it's bigger than
It
Than
is.
what they
It is
said,
both
or-
bigger, like just generally, and also in a vertical sense.
oh.
Yeah,
So they lied
it's
in a good way.
So it's condensed. Yeah, it's a condensed map, but it's very vertical. There's a lot of
Well,
like legacy
condensed-
dungeon style stuff.
Condensed by Elden Ring standards doesn't really mean much because the game is already huge to begin with.
Well, yeah,
So-
that's sort of what I mean. Is like Elden Ring is very sprawling in the base game, and I think they did a good job of kind of condensing that down into a more like you're gonna be finding stuff a lot more often in Shadow of the Erd Tree. It's a lot more close together, which I think works really well.
I feel like it hits that open world 90-second thing.
Yeah,
on
like it's a
pretty
lot
easily.
closer to that.
Some
Works
people
really
might
well.
prefer that over you know, the way that the world was designed in
Oh
the
yeah.
base game, maybe.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful like bite-sized thing of Elden Ring's general level design sensibilities.
Yeah, it's like the biomes are smaller, but they're definitely very full of stuff. And generally, there's a lot more like of the legacy dungeon style things here. The whole world feels more like a legacy dungeon type thing, which was the best stuff in Elden Ring. So I'm excited to see that that's continued. All right. Any other Shadow of the Erdtree thoughts before we move on? Like basically, Alex and I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Shocker again.
Haven't finished it yet, but all right, Wyatt, do you have anything you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I got a couple things. So this is going to be smaller because there isn't too much to talk about. But I've been playing more games on this guy. I haven't really stopped playing games on this guy. I adore this thing so much. Like I've mentioned before, it's such a great home for what mobile games used to be, which were like actual video games and not wait timers with some fancy graphics attached to it. Two of the games I've been playing recently aren't even ones that I bought. They just come on the system itself. Interestingly, they're both like top-down kind of like space games, which is kind of fun. One of them being, oh my god, I forgot the name because I am a silly boy.
Is this what got you back on your space game kick that you were looking at?
It's been continuing my space game kick. The space game kick has been going on for a hot minute.
Well, you and me both. Hasn't
Yeah,
stopped.
has
I
not
reinstalled
stopped.
Starfield.
You
there.
guys
I'm
up in the
getting
stars.
there.
Meanwhile, I'm in my samurai era.
You are in your samurai
There you
era,
go.
and you do
There you
need to
go.
play Ghost of Tsushima.
I really do. I need to get that and Rise of the Ronin really bad.
I've been considering doing another playthrough of Tsushima, but the first game I've been playing, you can see right there, Hyper Meteor. Very similar to like Asteroids. If you've ever played the classic Asteroids, there's asteroids flying around the screen, and you have a little ship, and you can't run into them, and you shoot your gun to kind of blow up the asteroids, and then the asteroids kind of go smaller asteroids. You got to fly around. Same basic concept, except here you don't have a gun. You have to fly into weak spots into the asteroids, which is a lot of fun. You hold up on the D-pad to like thrust forward, and then you use the crank to kind of aim your ship around. So you can make some really fancy like 180 or 360 turns and stuff like that to get the angle that you need on the specific asteroid, which is really fun. So that's been a lot of fun. And then the other one I've been playing is called Star Sled, which is kind of similar. The map is much bigger. It's not just on one screen. It's kind of scrolling. But the idea is kind of similar controls. You don't control your like speed at all, but you use the crank to kind of aim your ship. And you're flying around, and you have to collect, I think they're just called stars. But the idea is that you have to, whenever you're flying around, it leaves a trail behind you of wherever you flew. And the idea is you have to circle around these things in order to collect them. And they add in a ton of different stuff and a ton of different like modifiers. So sometimes it's like, oh, there are little sentinels that fly after you, or there's little ships that like stay on a very specific path. And if you run into either of these, you die. But sometimes it's like you can't get multiple stars in one like circle, or else you explode. There's also ones where like, oh, you can circle the enemy sentinels and then they explode, so you can get rid of like enemies. But sometimes if you circle them, they will just immediately fly after you. So there's all sorts of little like gimmicks that kind of keep each mission really fresh. And it's got both have great music, and they just have this like charming kind of lo-fi art style that fits in with the rest of the Playdate catalog. Playdate games are so much fun, you guys. They're fantastic.
They're really good.
You had
really
me
good.
circling enemies. That gave me Pokemon Ranger flashback stuff. I'm just like, ooh, but it's more expounded upon with the mechanics.
Yeah, I feel like
we're
gonna have to do at some point an episode on the like Playdate design philosophy of constraints, because I think that is a super interesting design topic to talk about. Of like the fact that it's so constrained makes you really creative in how you go about things.
Well, it's that other thing that makes me say like these feel like really well-made mobile games, because good mobile games are very similar in that, hey, all we're working with is a touchscreen here. Let's really like mold our game into what feels good using a touchscreen. Like Fruit Ninja is a perfect example. Such a fun arcade game to play because
Infinity Blade
acknowledges Infinity Blade. It
Oh,
acknowledges the fact
Infinity Blade.
that there's a touch blade, so you can swipe, you can tap, you can do all sorts of different controls. And so it really embraces, and you can tell there's a Playdate podcast where they interview developers on the games that they make for it. They even had a whole episode that's dedicated to like how this thing was made. It's really interesting. But you can tell every single developer that they reached out to make a game for it were so excited by the lack of inputs and the lack of technology. They were so excited by this crazy little crank thing on the side. They're like 2 buttons and a D-pad and this like little Post-it note size thing. Great, let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
And you can tell they were
Limitations
so
are like
excited.
yeast for creativity.
Oh yeah. It's addicting, and it's that perfect, again, like really good mobile games. It's that perfect like, oh, I'm watching a show with my girlfriend and she goes up to grab something or use the bathroom or whatever. It's just like, quick little
Speaking from personal experience,
30
Wyatt?
seconds or a minute. No, not at all. Not
Of
at all.
course
No. But no, just like super addicting. And it's also such a great community to be a part of. It's one of the few subreddits that I actually tend to follow pretty regularly because just people talking about how excited they are that their Playdate finally arrived, or it's a lot of people who are working with the Playdate developer kit and they're like, oh, there's an early version of my game on itch.io right now, check it out. And it's a lot of people being like, hey man, this looks really cool and can't wait to see more. It's just a fun, wholesome community to be a part of, which is always great.
Also great, I think underrated thing about Playdate, it is a great actual mobile thing, and that it's very easy to fit into a pocket and it's very light. Like you don't notice it if you're carrying it, which is perfect for a thing that you just like take with you. Like I tend to take mine in my pocket to work and just play it on my break or something.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, there's 2 apps on here that I don't think I'll ever get any use out of, but I could see people really being excited for. One, there's a whole e-reader app for this where you can just sideload text files into this and read it. I don't think I'd want to read books on a screen like this, but I think a lot of people might get a lot of use out of that. The more exciting thing for me, there's a whole MP3 player app.
And it's like a super good one too. It's like an audio file MP3 player app.
Yeah, so then you can just sideload whatever MP3s you have onto this thing. It's a super simple process. And then it turns into a little MP3 player, little game console thing. So I think if there are people out there who like don't want to pay for a subscription to Spotify, which is totally understandable, right? Or something like that, or Tidal or whatever it may be.
You want the Walkman experience?
You want the analog iPod Walkman experience, or Zune, if anyone remembers what a Zune is. I think this is also great for those people as well. Because unlike most modern devices out there, it's got a fucking headphone jack.
Yeah. Whoa, what an idea.
That's a blast from the past.
What is this caveman port right here? What is this crazy technology? This thing's great.
I miss Apple. I miss the headphone jack.
I do too.
Apple just has an excuse for you to lose 2 pieces of technology.
Thank God people who make portable game consoles have not followed that trend. I think there would be a lot of uproar if like the next Nintendo console didn't have a headphone jack or something. That would be insane.
Ooh, it makes it more waterproof. No, it makes you spend more money.
It's courage. It's all about courage. No, but Playdate is great, and I think there are so many. A lot of people will say that it's kind of a pricey device, which I understand, but it's built incredibly well. It's got a really healthy community, and it's not just, you don't just get games on the Playdate store, right? Those go through kind of like a certification process, and I think there's some sort of price attached to it, right? But you could just sideload games from itch.io. It like fully embraces that community, and a lot of people release their game on itch first and then panic. The developers are like, oh, this looks really cool, we want to put it on our storefront, and we'll take like a small amount from it. And again, games are anywhere from $3 to $10 or something like that. It's just, again, I feel like I'm just repeating myself, so I'm probably going to end the discussion there. But like,
quality
I love
mobile
this
games,
thing.
and it stops the sort of like spam, just like vitriol of fake stuff that you see on the App Store now. Where
Yeah,
it's like, oh, this advertisement that shows like none of the actual gameplay of it when it's one of those weird like really over sexualized castle builders.
Yeah,
That
everything now
just
is
are
like
everywhere.
everything now is like Clash of Clans or one of those like turn-based RPG mobile clicker
God.
things. So if you're looking for where did all the good mobile games go, there you go.
They migrated.
They migrated to a much better platform. Yeah. So that's that. And then as a complete kind of 180 spin from this, I've been really excited for Star Wars Outlaws. Very excited. That comes out end of next month. Very much looking forward to it. And so it inspired me to check out a game that I've been meaning to check out for a little bit. And then I realized that it's on Game Pass. I don't even have to pay for it, which is kind of nice. Well, pay for it. You know what I mean? I've been playing Far Cry 6. And listen, Ubisoft gets a lot of shit. A lot of it is very much justified. Especially Far Cry games. It's a lot of the same. I totally understand that, but God damn it. It just scratches an itch, and I can't really describe it. I mean, I kind of can, but it's just, there's something about the way that they do open worlds that, like, if you're like me and you don't usually play Ubisoft games as soon as they come out, and you just kind of wait a couple years and you move on with your life and you play other games and stuff, and then you come back to an Ubisoft game, yeah, you're probably going to get a pretty similar experience, but it's usually a pretty fun, similar experience. Far Cry 6 is fun. They're very good at like very open-ended sandbox style missions that you can tackle in a lot of different ways. They give you a lot of really fun tools. I really like the like scrappy guerrilla warfare kind of slant that they have this time. I love when you're building like scopes and suppressors and stuff for your weapons. It's all makeshift stuff. So like the suppressor for your sniper rifle is like a Coke can or like a milk jug, and like the scope on your rifle is a combination of like tin cans and glass bottles and stuff. It looks neat. You like take a conventional looking weapon and you strap a bunch of weird makeshift stuff on it, and it looks kind of fun. Yara's a pretty fun place to explore. It's this island that's been trapped in time in like the 1960s, so it's got this kind of like 60s or 70s kind of aesthetic to it, which is a lot of fun. The other thing too, Ubisoft can't write stories very well. They're just not very good at it. Whatever studio is working on an Ubisoft game, it's just no one talks like a human being. I feel like Far Cry is the only series, or one of the only series, I should say, where like people talk like humans and like they have personality and just some kind of like just some kind of pizzazz in the writing. Even if it's not very good, there's still an effort there, which is always appreciated, especially when you're talking about Ubisoft games. And they're just like, they're dumb fun that you go in for 10 whatever hours and you just mess around and see what you can get away with. I remember I had to blow up like a anti-air turret, but I didn't have any like explosives on me at the time. It was very early on in the game, so I was like, okay, what if I drive a truck over to this thing and then I cause a chain reaction of explosions that blows up the truck? I couldn't reach turret, but I could reach the truck. So like if I can create a chain reaction of explosion that blows up the truck, maybe the truck that's right next to the turret will actually blow up the turret. And it worked. And it was super cool. It was so much fun.
Yeah, Far Cry 6 especially to me feels a lot like it's kind of carrying the torch of Just Cause.
Yeah,
which I really
absolutely.
like.
Absolutely.
Not to say that Just Cause is like gone or anything, but I think Just Cause 4 was very much a little underwhelming. So it's cool to see that sort of survive. And I also remember Far Cry 6 having a good number of like fun stealth missions that I think aren't like required stealth, but I remember being able to approach them in a stealth way that was very fun. There's like one in particular that was like a little island fort that I had to raid for some piece of information or something, and then I actually went through and like did basically a Metal Gear style clear everyone out, move the bodies away, and then keep going. It was very fun.
They have a lot of there's just a lot of mechanics and systems going on. There's
Also,
just
Far Cry
a lot
6's
of neat.
color palette is excellent.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
it's an
things I
island.
could throw shade at for Far Cry, but that is not one of them.
Yeah, it's this kind of like Cuba-inspired island, and it just looks super, super neat. And they always have their villains. So they have Giancarlo Esposito playing their main villain, and shocker, he does a great job. Who knew? Yeah, it's fun. It's really, really dumb fun. And I get that if you're someone who's disappointed by a Far Cry game, you pay full price, and it's like, oh, this feels like Far Cry 5 that I played however many years ago. I totally understand that, but Ubisoft usually does a pretty decent job of like discounting their games fairly often. So if you pick up a Far Cry game for $15-20 or something a few years after it comes out or whatever, I think it's totally worth it. They're a lot of fun, as long as you don't take anything you're doing, too seriously.
Yeah, I think Far Cry 6 also avoids a lot of the length complaints because it is a more reasonable length and runtime than something like Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
They also, I don't know how I feel about this. It feels, I love how much effort they put into this specific thing, but also it feels kind of awkward. They have a cockfighting minigame that's like a fighting game with like light and heavy attacks and like dodging and stuff, and you're like collecting different roosters that you find in the open world.
Oh my god.
And like you have to bet money in order to like win money, and sometimes it's like cool rewards and stuff. Surprising amount of effort, but it's like cockfighting. So it's like I this feels weird. I don't know how I feel about this. But it's really cute. They even have like a character selection screen where it's like versus and like all this fun. It's kind of cute. Again, it's cockfighting, so I don't know. I feel kind of morally dubious about partaking in it at all. But it's cute, and there's a surprising amount of effort put into it.
It's a layer of obfuscation that I don't question it.
It's cute and cockfighting being used in the same breath.
Yeah, it's a little weird. It's a little weird. I also think that the like gear grind that's been in a lot of modern Ubisoft games isn't quite as prevalent here. That tends to kill like Assassin's Creed and other games like that. Here it's like you have a preset, like it's not like, oh, random gun that does 2 more damage than your other random gun. It's like, no, it's like specific pieces of gear that have different like abilities, and usually has like an armor rating, and it's like a set amount, so it's not like randomized gear like you get Odyssey or something like that. So it's a bit more like focused, which is nice. It's not quite as like number crunching, which is always appreciated. Kind of feels more like classic Far Cry games, which is always nice to see because they've really needed to pare back on that in recent years. No, it's fun. If you can pick it up for cheap, I think it's really worth it. I think you're going to get a lot of dumb fun out of it. And I can't wait for Star Wars Outlaws. I'm very excited.
All right. I've got, I think, just 2 things that I also wanted to mention running in. Final Fantasy XIV got its new expansion, Dawntrail, which I've been playing a little bit of, but less than I normally would for a 14 expansion, because Shadow of the Erdtree dropped at the same time, and I was playing that, and then I got really addicted to Zenless Zone Zero, and so my time went mostly into
different
those.
Directions.
Getting pulled in a lot of directions, yeah. But Dawntrail's been interesting
drawn and quartered
because
by games.
yeah, Dawntrail's reception has been a little bit more lukewarm than every other Final Fantasy DLC, which I think everyone kind of expected, because it is, without any spoilers, Endwalker was the end of the saga that they had been doing for a while, and was like, you went and fought the thing that you had to fight, you did all the stuff that you had to do, and it's sort of like, where do you go after that? And Dawntrail is just like, the stakes are relatively low. It's the setup is that you're helping Wuk-Lamat, a Hrothgar child. She's the child of a ruler in a different nation. It's like the adopted child, and essentially there's like a rite of like succession going on there, and you have to go help her try to actually take the throne, because one of the people in the rite of succession wants to start a war. So that's sort of the setup from the starting point of it.
That's a fun setup.
fun setup. It's very much back to like the world that you're in like the regular storytelling of Final Fantasy. I think that's its strengths.
Go cross map and talk to different people, then fast travel
That's
across
the
the continent.
problem. So the biggest issue so far is that, first of all, it's a different writer than the other expansions, because Ishikawa, who has been writing since, I want to say, Heaven's Ward, did a phenomenal job on everything. I believe is working on mainline Final Fantasy now. I don't know where, but I know she was on FF14 for a while, and this was probably being written at least partly at the same time. So the credit here is a little bit different. I think the writing is not problematic so far, but it's a little bit too rose-colored. Like, I think there's a lot of cases in Dawntrail so far, and I'm not very far in, but it seems like a lot of the writing has lost its edge, and so I'm hopeful that's more just like a growing pains thing or a starting out the expansion thing, and we'll get a little bit more interesting stuff later on. But the biggest problem is Dawntrail at the start of it doesn't let you play the game. It's very much a like walk and talk to people for a couple hours at the start, which is like a thing that they generally do this relatively often in Final Fantasy XIV, but usually the stuff going on is like very high stakes and interesting, and they'll throw in a couple of fights in between everything. So it feels a lot more natural. It's like you're going and exploring. So far, I've been playing the actual main story of Dawntrail for a little while, and there's been basically no fights. There's been no actual gameplay.
Is this because they're starting in a whole nother area and they need to
So
do some
that's
more
my suspicion.
building?
From people I know that are further in, I've been told this gets much better about the halfway point, where it's going to become a lot more fast-paced and a lot more stuff is going on. Which is understandable, because this is like they're having to set up a whole new continent, a whole new set of characters to deal with. The last story is closed out, so we don't have through lines that existed before. I think that it makes a lot of sense that they're taking a slower pace here. I still think they needed to try and find ways to inject gameplay here, especially because there's in the 6.5 patch, and I'm not going to spoil any story stuff, but there is a duty they do there, and duties are just like the events or the gameplay stuff that you go through that is like an instance piece of gameplay, where it's basically like a miniature dungeon that you go through with the story characters involved in that patch, and it's very short, but it's like a fun, you walk through, it's voice acted and everything. And that was super fun, and it's going from like that, which I think is sort of the high end of production value, to a lot of just like unvoiced text as this intro to the next expansion feels very strange. And I think to me the thing that's hitting me is I think 14 needs to start putting more effort into presentation outside of the big moments for stuff like this, because I think it's starting to feel very dated coming from now looking at like WoW and ESO and whatnot having largely voice acted main storylines and everything like that. I think 14 has much more writing in it. It's a lot more text heavy, but it still is feeling a little bit weird to go from like ESO to that.
There was a graphical upgrade, right?
Yes, which is amazing. The game looks so much better now across the entire game. And the new classes, super fun. I'm playing through Dawntrail on a Viper that I've been leveling, and it's very fun. I think Viper is a super cool job. I am a little concerned because there's a blog post that went out from the 14 devs saying that Viper is going to get some changes because people are complaining that it's too busy, which I think is maybe not a problem. Like, I think the busy complaints were coming from people that were more confused about the tooltips of the text that describes how Viper works is not great. Viper's a little bit complicated, and I think it needed a better tutorial. But it comes down to
play a tank.
It comes down to press your ability that gives them a debuff, and then just follow the glowing lights on your hotbar until the end. It plays like Dancer. I think it's really fun. I have been having a great time with it, but I'm going to be really sad if they slow it down, because I think the amount of stuff it's got going on feels really good. To be fair, I'm not at level 100 yet. I'm just at level like 91, so I'm hoping it sticks the course and they don't do any like heavy-handed changes, but we'll see. And Pictomancer is also super fun. A very cool class that is focused around like painting as attacks and whatnot. You get like a cool Moogle laser. Very neat. Yeah, Pictomancer is cool too. I think the problem is they released 2 DPS classes in the same expansion, which means queue times are really bad because
Those are
there's no
gonna be
new tank or
clogged, yeah.
healer. But hey, at least I like playing Sage 2, and so I've been leveling that alongside just to make sure that when I have to do a thing with other people, I can play the healer instead and have an instant queue. So, yeah. Otherwise, I think it's good. I don't think it's like a bad expansion at all, but I do think the lukewarm reception makes sense, and I hope it's kind of a wake-up call that the presentation, at least at the start, needs to be better next time around. Especially coming off the heels of like Shadowbringers and Endwalker, which are incredibly high production value at the beginning and really draw you in, and never really have a lull. I think Dawntrail definitely has a lull at the start, but that's not weird. Every MMO has had expansions like that. I think it's just unfortunate that 14's is kind of coming at a time where 14 was doing really well. And had a really strong sort of kickstart, and it feels like they're kind of falling into a routine, which I hope is not the case, because I think there's a lot more they can do. So, yeah, I hope they get more into the fun stuff that they started doing in the patches, and less of the just walking and talking and going to 3 people, 2 of which have nothing to say, and then you go talk to the 3rd, and they're the one that actually has something to say. Which is a lot of the quest lines in early Dawntrail and in Realm Reborn, which is not great. All right, second game that I wanted to mention is Road 96. This is a game I've kind of been playing while I was sick because I didn't really have the last couple of days. I have not had the fortitude to actually play a video game that required me to press buttons in a timely manner. Sick enough where that wasn't really doable. So instead I was playing Road 96, which is a sort of like roguelite road trip game about teens trying to escape a country that is going in the gutter, and it's really good. It is not what I thought it would be at all. Basically, the way that it works is there's a cast of characters that you meet as you're sort of a teenager trying to hitchhike out of the country, and each run is you'll get an event for every character that you meet along the way, possibly meeting the same one more than once. And as you try to escape, these events play out and things will happen. You'll learn about the characters' relationships with other characters. Like, one of them is trying to hunt down and kill one of the others. One of them is trying to protect the person that's being hunted and aimed to try and get killed. And it's very interesting. And the thing with finishing a run is, like, you finish a run if you get to the border and escape. But that isn't the end of the game, because every time you finish a run, whether you succeed or fail, the timeline moves forward. And the idea is that it's all moving forward to Election Day, where the dictator may or may not win based on things that you do. So there are choices you make as you're playing where it's like you can encourage people to vote, you can encourage people to rebel, you can encourage people to just leave the country instead, and I have a feeling that's going to lead to 3 different endings. I'm not to that point yet, but it's very interesting. The setup's really cool, and it's very fun so far. There's lots of little mini games and stuff that happen as you're going. There's little puzzles and whatnot that you can do for certain characters. You can
I like
play
the
Pong.
style of this game too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had not heard much about this before, and I think I had it in my Steam library just from a Humble Bundle and was just like, hey, this looks interesting, and tried it out. And yeah, it's really cool. You get sort of permanent upgrades by playing runs where certain characters will like teach you a thing that you keep throughout the rest of your runs, which is stuff like someone teaches you how to hack, and so every other character you play after that point will be able to hack. There's a character that teaches you how to sort of get more energy and be able to survive on the road longer, and that helps you out for the rest of the game. And stuff like that. And there's just a few things like that are really cool. Like, one character you have to who is a serial killer, you can die to them, as I did. By making the wrong choices.
Oh boy.
And you can also survive, like I did on one of my other characters, and got through an encounter with them, and it's very interesting the way that it plays out. So, yeah, very cool. Just a kind of a wild game.
That's really cool.
Interesting.
All right. Well, that said, unless someone else has another game to bring up, I think we're done. We're good to go.
I can briefly mention playing the new Deep Rock Galactic season. Very, very good. They have the best reward structure of any live service field game that has battle pass style content that I've ever seen. It's incredibly fair and all free, and now you can go back to previous seasons and get any unlocks that you didn't before, which is great. The new game mode is fantastic, and the only thing that you have to pay for is optional cosmetics, which are really great and also not a complete pain in the ass because there's already so many different cosmetics in the game that it doesn't matter. Go play Deep Rock Galactic.
All right, well, that said, we're now at shoutouts. So Wyatt, I'm going to just have you do yours first because you were talking. So I hope you got it ready.
Putting me on the... I'm so ready. 100%
Well, there is one
ready.
game we didn't talk about. Ooh, that we've all been playing.
I actually had one, and then I forgot what it was, which is great. Little game shout out for you. I've just started playing it, so I didn't want to talk about it because I don't have a lot to say yet. But Plucky Squire's coming out soon, and I was reading an interview with one of the guys who worked on Plucky Squire, and he made a game called The Sword of Ditto, which looked like a little like Zelda-inspired like kind of adventure action game with some roguelike elements, and I was like, oh, let's check this out. It's kind of neat so far. I don't really know much about it. But it's got this cute little art style, and I'm excited to learn more, and it looks very adorable so far.
Very cool. All right, I'll go ahead and do mine next, Alex, while you ruminate. I want to shout out a game that I haven't played yet because I'm not caught up on the series, but I'm very excited to, which is Trails Through Daybreak. For people that don't know, Trails is a very long-running JRPG series that is all kind of interconnected. There's different sort of trilogies and like quadrilogies in it that are set in different areas of the same world. But they, to my understanding, all have been building towards like a big story going on in one area, which I think was Trails Through Reverie or something like that, which I, again, have not played because I'm not caught up on the series. But Daybreak came out in the West just last week, I think. And this is like, we're like 2 years behind the Japanese releases of these franchises. But Daybreak has some of the coolest looking JRPG combat that I've ever seen. It's super cool. It's like a cool mix of like strategy and action, and it's all set on like a place where you move your characters around and do actions, which reminds me a lot of the Cold Steel games, which have a really fun combat system of like you are moving on a circle that is the combat arena, but you actually move and position all your characters in 3D space and do all of your things. And it just looks really good. I think it's a very cool looking combat system. And from everything I've heard, Daybreaks is like the best version of it. And it's getting extremely high reviews. So I'm shouting that out because I need to start playing through like a 14 game series now.
Oh my
that
god.
I've only played like 2 games of. So
oh my lord.
I need to go finish the Trails in the Sky series first.
Oh my lord.
It's gonna be quite the undertaking.
Oh yeah.
Good thing we talked about not doing spoilers earlier, because I think my original shout out where I might have blown out my mic from screaming is technically a spoiler, so I'm just going to shout out the voice actor. Richard Linton, I think gives a absolutely amazing performance in Shadow of the Erdtree as his character Egon.
Who screams about his legs when you first meet him, and it's great.
My legs, my arms, each lie in a bloody ruin.
Maybe the best voice acting a FromSoft character has ever had.
He is so over the top, and I love him.
Actually, no, I take that back because Rusty's "I Won't Miss" is the best line that has ever been said, but close second.
Of FromSoft or ever?
Just ever.
Fair
it's
enough.
Just that activates something in my neurons. Maybe next to Guns, Guns, Guns as well. But there's a couple of lines that are very good. All right, well, that's the end of the show. So as always, Tuesdays on the podcast platform of your choice, YouTube and Twitch. We'll see you next time.
Maybe
More
hopefully
stuff to
less
talk
sick. Hopefully.
Yeah, man, that would suck if I was still sick by then.
Oh boy.
I remember when we both had bronchitis at like the same time, which was hilarious. Somehow we matched that up perfectly.